I've repeated those words in my head a dozen times since that day, though the real exchange was far quieter, less heroic, and somehow heavier. I remember it all in fragments. The way her hand lingered just a second too long on the stack of invoices, the faint smell of jasmine drifting from her scarf, the soft hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. The repair shop smelled of oil and damp rubber, a low mechanical heartbeat that somehow made her seem even more out of place. She moved through the shop like she owned a space that wasn't hers, and yet, in a way, she did. Mid-40s, sharp-cut blazer over a soft cashmere sweater, hair loosely pinned back, but with strands escaping in a deliberate way, and eyes, God, the eyes, that seemed to take in everything without giving anything away. I was 24, barely keeping my own mess of a desk in order, still fumbling with the coffee machine. But the instant she walked in, I felt like the world had shifted just slightly off its axis. Her name is Claire. She doesn't let you call her by it unless she allows it. I didn't get permission yet, of course. But even from across the counter, I could see the faint twitch at the corner of her mouth when she caught me staring at a loose bolt I was supposed to be tightening. Something like amusement, or was it curiosity? And I wanted to ask, wanted to laugh, wanted to disappear, all at once. I handed her the invoice she'd asked for, and our fingers brushed for a moment longer than necessary. It was accidental, probably, but it made the air between us hum in a way that made my chest tight. She didn't pull away, just adjusted the papers, never looking at me directly, though I could feel her gaze lingering. And in that pause, I thought maybe she noticed it too, the odd thrum of something unspoken. "Do you always stand behind the counter staring at screws?" she asked finally, with that dry, confident tone that somehow made me feel small and seen all at once. I choked on my answer. Only the ones that are, interesting." She raised an eyebrow, tilting her head just slightly. There was a small smile there, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. I knew then she carried something heavier than casual sarcasm, like she'd seen a lot, and nothing surprised her, yet nothing truly satisfied her either. I wanted to fix that. I wanted to be the thing that made her eyes soften. She glanced at the stack of car parts behind me. "Everything in order here." "Mostly," I said. Mostly wasn't true, but it felt safer than admitting how distracted I was by her presence. And then it happened, a quiet, almost imperceptible gesture. She placed her hand on the edge of the counter near mine, just for a second, as she leaned over to read something on the clipboard. That second stretched long enough for the fluorescent hum to fade out, for the oil smell to turn strangely comforting, and for me to realize I'd remember the feel of her fingers there forever. She stepped back and straightened her blazer. "I'm going to check the parts in the back," she said, voice neutral. But there was a weight behind it that made me want to follow her, to ask her why she made the ordinary feel like a storm. I stayed behind the counter, gripping a wrench too tightly, watching her walk away. The way she moved, the confidence, the quiet authority, made my chest ache in a way I hadn't anticipated. I didn't understand why, and I wasn't sure I wanted to yet. I keep thinking about that brush of her fingers, the pause between words, the almost smile that hid something else entirely. And I can't stop wondering, if the world allowed it, could someone like me, messy, impatient, barely 24, ever belong in hers? The afternoon sun slanted through the dusty windows of the repair shop, catching the motes of sawdust in a golden haze. I was under a car, knees scraped, arms greasy, trying to ignore the sound of Claire's heels clicking across the concrete floor. She had that calm, deliberate way of moving, like nothing could rattle her. And yet, the brief sigh she let out as she leaned over a cluttered workbench betrayed a flicker of exhaustion. "I can't seem to find the gasket," she murmured, almost to herself. Her voice wasn't complaining. It was quiet, edged with something else, frustration, maybe, or the faintest hint of vulnerability. I crawled out from under the car, wiped my hands on a rag, and crouched beside her. "Here," I said softly, pointing to a box tucked behind a stack of manuals. She looked at me, just for a second, her eyes cautious. The kind of cautious that says, "Don't get too close. You might fall into a mess you don't understand." "Thanks," she said, voice clipped but not unkind. She reached for the box, fingers brushing mine again. I caught the tremor in her hand, subtle but real. She didn't pull away immediately, just paused, as though trying to steady herself. She shifted her weight, glanced at me, and laughed. Quiet, short, almost dismissive, like she didn't trust herself to enjoy it. I watched her, memorizing the lines at the corners of her eyes. The way her hair fell across her forehead when she tilted her head. The faint tiredness that made her shoulders slump just slightly. "You work too much," I said, more a statement than a question. "I like it," she said, but there was a hitch in her tone that I couldn't ignore. A tiny, imperceptible thing, but enough for me to notice she wasn't fully convincing herself. We bent over the parts together, silence stretching between us, heavy and charged. Every so often, her hand would brush against mine again, accidental or not, and I'd feel that same pulse, that quiet electricity that made my chest tighten. I wanted to speak, to ask her something simple, something that might let her drop the wall she carried so naturally. But the words caught in my throat. Then she paused, leaning on the bench, her head tilting toward the ceiling like she was trying to organize her thoughts. I saw the faint crease between her brows, the subtle bite of her lip, the way her eyes softened when she finally met mine. It was a quiet surrender, nothing dramatic, but it landed in my chest like a small explosion. "You always notice the little things," she said finally, almost a whisper. I wasn't sure if it was a compliment, a tease, or an accusation. I shrugged, but my gaze lingered on her. "I notice what matters." She didn't respond, just adjusted the box of parts and straightened, brushing her fingers against mine one last time before turning away. The touch was fleeting, but it left a trail of warmth, a question that lingered between us. And I stayed there, watching her move, feeling the quiet pull I wasn't supposed to follow, but couldn't stop myself from feeling anyway. The rain had started just after 6, drumming against the large windows of the repair shop. Everything felt smaller inside, closer, more intimate, and I was acutely aware of how near Claire was as we bent over the same engine part. Her coat hung on the hook behind her, damp at the collar, and a few errant strands of hair clung to her forehead. I wanted to reach out and brush them away, but I stayed frozen, pretending to inspect the part while my mind ran circles. "You know," she said softly, not looking at me, "sometimes I think I should have done something different years ago." Her voice was almost lost under the storm, but I caught it. I didn't answer. I wasn't supposed to answer. This was one of those moments you don't rush into. One of those quiet confessions that could shatter the space between us if spoken aloud. Her hand brushed mine accidentally, just a light graze, but the shock of contact made me inhale sharply. She didn't pull back immediately. Instead, her fingers lingered near mine for a heartbeat longer than necessary, and then she turned her gaze elsewhere, toward the soaked street outside. I felt the tension coil in my chest like a spring. A sudden vibration from her phone broke the silence. She glanced down quickly, frowned, and stepped a few feet away. "It's someone from work," she muttered. The moment evaporated, the intimacy scattering like smoke in the wind. I stayed still, gripping a wrench tighter than necessary, feeling the weight of what almost happened. When she returned, the warmth from her coat had seeped into the fabric of the shirt she had draped over her arm. The shop smelled faintly of rain and oil, and everything about her, her tired eyes, the line of her jaw, the slight slump in her shoulders, was imprinted on me in a way I couldn't ignore. I wanted to say something, anything, to bridge the gap that had opened in those few moments, but the words wouldn't come. We worked in silence after that, the storm outside a soft drumbeat that echoed the tension between us. Every time our hands crossed over a tool or a bolt, I felt the same pull, the same unspoken energy that made me question every boundary I thought I had. My mind raced. Say something. Don't say anything. Step closer. Step back. But I did neither. Finally, she straightened, brushing her damp hair from her face, and for a second our eyes met. It was enough. Enough to make me feel like the world had narrowed down to the space between us. I could almost reach for her, almost let the truth slip out, almost bridge the line we both seemed afraid to cross. But the shop door rattled with the wind, and she flinched slightly, breaking the fragile spell. I stayed rooted in place, a wrench in my hand, heart hammering, knowing that what I wanted hung just out of reach, like the storm itself, wild and beautiful, impossible to hold. And so I let the almost happen linger there, a quiet question neither of us dared to answer, while the rain kept falling and the room seemed impossibly small, impossibly electric. The shop was quieter than usual that evening. The storm from yesterday had left the air heavy, thick with damp, and the fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead. Claire leaned against the counter, arms crossed, staring at a stack of invoices she hadn't touched in hours. I sat on the edge of a workbench, watching her, trying to summon the courage to say something that might change everything or nothing. Finally, she broke the silence. "Do you ever think about why we're here?" Her voice was low, but there was a tremor I hadn't heard before. I swallowed. I don't know," I admitted, unsure if I meant it. "I guess I just show up." She laughed, but it was hollow, a short exhale that didn't reach her eyes. "Show up. That's one way to put it." Her gaze flicked to mine, sharp and searching, as if trying to measure the distance between us, the space our words had failed to fill. I wanted to say more. I wanted to tell her that every glance, every accidental touch, every pause where she let her hand linger had left me unmoored. But instead, I let the silence stretch, because saying it aloud felt like stepping off a cliff without a rope. She tilted her head, watching me. "We can't pretend this is normal anymore, can we?" Her voice cracked slightly, betraying the control she usually wore like armor. I noticed the faint redness under her eyes, the subtle slump of her shoulders, the way her fingers fidgeted with the hem of her sweater. Vulnerable, fragile, and utterly human. "No," I said finally, voice barely above a whisper. "We can't." She exhaled slowly, almost as if she were releasing a part of herself she had been holding too tightly. "I don't know what this is, or what we're doing." Her eyes held mine then, and I saw it all. The weight of experience, the hesitation born of history, the quiet yearning she wouldn't let herself admit. I shifted closer, careful not to touch her, careful not to cross the invisible line we both knew existed. "Neither do I," I said. And in that moment, neither of us needed to lie. The space between our words carried everything: regret, longing, confusion, something raw and unspoken that neither of us could define. She blinked, a single tear threatening to fall before she swallowed it back. Maybe we're just afraid," she said finally, voice cracking like glass. "Afraid of what it would mean if we stopped pretending." And then she looked away, toward the dusty floor, a hand resting on the counter like it anchored her to reality. The silence returned, but it wasn't the same. It was heavier now, charged, impossible to ignore. I could feel the storm inside her matching the one I felt in my chest, and for the first time, I realized that pretending we were just colleagues, just friends, had already ended long before she said the words aloud. I wanted to tell her everything: how I noticed the tiny details, the tremor in her hand, the curve of her lips when she thought no one was watching. I wanted to tell her that I'd stay, even if she didn't want me to. But the only thing I managed to whisper was, I don't want to lose this." She didn't answer. She just pressed her fingers against the counter tighter, and the faintest shiver ran through her frame. And I knew, in that suspended moment, that neither of us could ever go back to pretending again. I found her sitting alone in the back office, a half-empty mug of coffee in her hand, the steam curling lazily into the dim light. She didn't notice me at first, lost in something I couldn't quite read: sadness, maybe, or memory. Her fingers traced the rim of the mug absently, and I realized the lines at the corner of her eyes deepened in the shadows. "Claire," I said softly, stepping closer. She looked up, startled, like she hadn't expected anyone to see her in this quiet, unguarded moment. I got a letter today," she said, almost as if she were talking to herself. Her voice was flat, but fragile. She held out a crumpled envelope, worn at the edges, the ink slightly smudged. "From someone I used to know? Someone I lost." I nodded slowly, unsure what to say. I wanted to reach for her hand, to ground her somehow, but I stayed a step back. She seemed fragile, and I didn't want to break that fragile moment by filling it with my own words. "I didn't think I'd ever hear from him again," she whispered, staring at the paper as if it could answer every question she hadn't dared to ask herself. There was a softness in her, a vulnerability I had only glimpsed before, fleeting and fleetingly terrifying. I found myself kneeling beside her, careful not to crowd her, careful not to intrude. "It's okay," I said, though I wasn't sure it was. "You don't have to face it alone." She let out a shuddering laugh, the kind that hides tears behind sound. "I don't even know if I remember him correctly, or if I'm remembering the way I wanted to remember him. But it hurt. It hurt a lot, and I didn't know how to move past it." Her honesty knocked the air out of me. I wanted to say, "I get it," but I couldn't. I could only stay present, letting the quiet between us speak. I noticed the slight tremble in her hand, the way her eyes glossed over with something unspoken. My chest ached with a tenderness I couldn't name. "You're still carrying it," I said finally, voice low. "All of it." She swallowed hard, looking down at the envelope, then back at me. "I suppose I am," she admitted. Then she laughed again, quieter this time, almost embarrassed. "I didn't mean for it to affect me like this. I'm supposed to be strong, in control." I shook my head gently. Strong doesn't mean carrying it alone. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is let someone in, even just a little. She studied me, that guarded confidence mixing with raw uncertainty, and for the first time, she let herself linger in the space between us without pretending she had all the answers. Then she placed the envelope on the desk, fingers brushing mine accidentally, or maybe not. That tiny touch, fleeting but deliberate enough to leave warmth behind, felt seismic. I didn't speak. I couldn't. I just watched her inhale sharply, close her eyes, and for a moment, the distance between us shrank, a quiet understanding threading through the tension we had built for weeks. And in that suspended breath, I realized something had shifted. Something unspoken, fragile, and impossible to ignore. The shop was almost empty that evening, the late hum of the overhead lights blending with the faint scent of motor oil and damp concrete. Claire leaned against the counter, flipping through a notebook she rarely used. I perched on the edge of a stool nearby, pretending to organize some tools, but really watching her. The small movements, the quiet exhale she didn't realize she was holding, the way her fingers lingered on the page before turning it. "I've been thinking," she said finally, her voice soft, careful, as if she were testing the air between us. "About everything. About us." I didn't answer right away. I could feel the weight of the words pressing down, heavy and tender all at once. She looked up, meeting my gaze. "I think we've been avoiding it, pretending it doesn't exist." Her lips pressed together for a moment, and then she let out a sigh, slow and deliberate, as if admitting it aloud made it more real. I moved a little closer, not in a rush, just enough so that our shoulders brushed. The brush of her sweater against mine sent a shiver through me, and for the first time, the tension between us didn't feel like danger. It felt like inevitability. "I don't know where it goes from here," she continued, "but I can't not notice it anymore." Her eyes were steady, but vulnerable. I could see the hesitation, the careful control she usually held like armor, finally softening. "I feel the same," I whispered, voice low. Not loud, not perfect, just, I trailed off, letting the words hang. She nodded, understanding without needing more. We didn't move closer intentionally, didn't lean in dramatically, didn't speak of love. We simply existed in the same space, letting the quiet fill the room. There was something tender about the ordinary, the way she adjusted a loose bolt, the way I set a wrench down beside her, the shared rhythm of small, mundane tasks. It felt like permission. Permission to be close without fear, permission to notice each other fully. Then, almost imperceptibly, our hands met. Just the tips of our fingers, brushing, lingering. A warmth spread through both of us, grounding, real. No declarations, no grand gestures. Just a hand touching a hand, and the acknowledgement that whatever this was, it had arrived, quietly but undeniably. She glanced down at our hands, then back up at me, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I needed to fix the space between us. We didn't need words. The room, The dim light, the faint hum, the scent of oil and rain held us in that suspended moment. Finally, she exhaled, a slow, almost shy smile forming at the corners of her mouth. "I suppose we'll figure it out," she said softly. "I suppose we will," I replied. And there it was, the quiet collapse into something that had always been waiting. Not perfect, not dramatic, just ours. Hands still touching, shoulders brushing, eyes holding. Enough to know that whatever came next, we wouldn't pretend again. For the first time, the silence between us felt like home. It's been months since that evening in the shop, the one where we finally stopped pretending. I still remember the quiet of it, the soft hum of the lights, the faint smell of oil and rain, and the way her hand felt against mine, tentative but certain. Every time I think back, I catch myself holding my breath, as if that moment is still suspended somewhere between then and now. Claire hasn't changed who she is, sharp, careful, confident, but the edges I once saw as walls are softer now. I see the small cracks, the spaces where she lets herself be human, and I notice the way she looks at the world differently, more gently, now that she allows herself to feel without armor. I've changed too. I'm less restless, more patient, more willing to let the quiet moments matter instead of chasing the grand ones. We've learned, in the slow, imperfect way that love teaches, that connection isn't about declarations or dramatic gestures. It's in the pauses, the shared tasks, the fleeting touches that leave warmth behind. It's in noticing the tremor of someone's hand, the way they smile when they think no one is watching, the way silence can be a conversation all its own. I used to think I understood love, the kind you see in movies, the kind that bursts into fireworks and music, but now I know it's quieter, steadier, more fragile and stubborn at once. It's about showing up, every day, even when it's messy. It's about acknowledging the past, but not letting it dictate the future. It's about letting someone in, little by little, and trusting that they'll stay. Claire and I still argue, still misread each other, still have moments where words fail, but we also stay. We listen. We notice. We hold space for each other. And somehow, that has become everything. I look at her now, across the counter as she flips through a notebook, hair loose around her face, the sunlight catching the faint lines of her expression, and I realize I've stopped worrying about whether this is right or allowed. Because it is. It's ours, in all its quiet imperfection, and that is more than enough. For anyone watching, maybe that's the thing to take away. Love doesn't always arrive with fireworks. Sometimes, it's in the subtle shifts, the almost imperceptible gestures, the understanding that grows between two people over time. And sometimes, the quiet moments are the ones that matter the most. So, if you find yourself in a room with someone who makes the ordinary feel extraordinary, who challenges and softens you all at once, don't overthink it. Notice it. Hold it. Let it linger. Because life and love rarely comes with a script, but the unscripted moments, those are unforgettable. And if you've ever had a connection that left you breathless in silence, leave a comment and share your story. I'd love to hear it.